So obviously Jesus was probably in that general area during that period of time. And we'll see how that kind of plays into different things as we kind of go through kind of the things that Philip did and what Philip was a part of. He kind of clinged, I think, a little bit to, obviously Nathanael we'll see here, but he also, I think, clinged a little bit to Andrew. And we'll see that here in a little bit. But again, Jesus calls Philip. Philip follows him. And then verse 45, Philip goes immediately and finds Nathanael and says unto him that we have found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets did write, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Now, also interesting to note that Philip recognized, obviously, who Jesus was. And as soon as he started following Jesus, he immediately went and grabbed what could be maybe his friend or somebody that he was kind of close to in Nathanael. And he brought Nathanael to Christ. Now, Nathanael was, I think, a little bit more skeptic, maybe in a way. It doesn't say that Jesus said, "Follow me," and Nathanael immediately followed him. Nathanael had a little bit of questioning to Philip. So in verse 45, Philip finds Nathanael and kind of tells him, "Hey, we found the one that Moses and the other prophets talked about in the Old Testament. We have found him. He's here." In verse 46, and Nathanael said unto him, Can there any good thing come out of Nazareth? So again, that more than likely the culture of that day, Nazareth was probably not the most respected town. Maybe the people there were probably not the most respected town. I'm sure Bible scholars can go into great detail of what kind of went on maybe during that in that city or whatever. But Nathanael here questions Philip right off the bat and says, "Is there anything does anything good come out of Nazareth?" And Philip said unto him, "Come and see." So Philip didn't answer his question. He was just like, "Look, you just need to come see what this man that I've kind of saw and started following, and you need to just come and see him. He's the one that Moses and the other prophets talked about." And there's no doubt that they had obviously the Old Testament, so they knew if they studied any or read any of the Old Testament that there's multiple places in the Old Testament where it talks about Jesus coming, all the way back to Genesis. But again, Nathanael questions Philip, and verse 47, so 46, Philip tells Nathanael, "Come and see." So they're going to see Jesus, they're going to see him, and Jesus, verse 47, Jesus saw Nathanael coming to him and saith of him, "Behold an Israelite indeed, in whom is no guile." So Jesus recognizes him. Jesus recognized who Nathanael was. And it says in 48, Nathanael said unto him, "Whence knowest thou me?" Like, how did you know it was me? And there's a lot you can unpack here that God knows, Jesus knows everything about us, and even if we don't recognize him, even the ones that don't recognize him or don't follow him, God knows everything. God created everything. So he definitely knows his creation, and he knows everything about us, and kind of how we operate, all of our different personalities. So there's no doubt that that Jesus knew Nathanael. And obviously 48, Nathanael said unto him, Whence knowest thou me? And Jesus answered and said unto him, Before that Philip called thee, so before Philip even told you about me, told you to come see me, Jesus said that when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. So again, Jesus already has recognized Nathanael, and no doubt probably already had picked him to be an apostle. And we see that Jesus says that when thou wast under the fig tree, I saw thee. And immediately Nathanael then recognizes Jesus as the Son of God. He calls him Rabbi, thou art the Son of God, thou art the King of Israel. And what's interesting, and I know I'm kind of moving quickly through this part, but in 50, Jesus answered and said unto him, he poses a question to him, and he says, Because I said unto thee, I saw thee under the fig tree, believest thou? And then he goes on and says, Thou shalt see greater things than these. So as Nathanael is called to be an apostle, no doubt that he got some unbelievable teaching from Jesus, unbelievable. He saw miracles happen. He was one of the 12 that followed Jesus all the way through his ministry. So again, not a lot talked about Nathanael. I think in another place in another gospel he's referred to as Bartholomew, right? Maybe. But nonetheless, in John he's referred to as Nathanael. So that's where we're kind of at this morning. So the first chapter of the Gospel of John, we see the calling of Philip and we see the calling of Nathanael. Philip is also mentioned next in the book of John. He's mainly mentioned, if not only, like I said earlier, in the book of John. And we've kind of talked about this next event before, but Philip is mentioned when Jesus feeds the 5,000. So, for sake of time, I'll read, and this is where I get in trouble. So we'll see if I can pronounce these words. But if you'll flip over to John chapter 6, we'll go over this story again. We'll see the perspective of Philip in this story. So Gospel of John chapter 6, it says, starting in verse 1, After these things Jesus went over the Sea of Galilee, which is the Sea of Tiberias, and a great multitude followed him, because they saw his miracles which he did on them that were diseased. And again in chapter 5, he heals, he does some miracles, so this is kind of a continuation. Verse 3, it says, And Jesus went up into a mountain, and there he sat with his disciples. And the Passover, a feast of the Jews, was nigh. When Jesus then lifted up his eyes, he saw a great company come unto him, and saith unto Philip, Whence shall we buy bread, that these may eat? And this he said to prove him, for he himself knew what he would do. Philip answered him, 200 penny worth of bread is not sufficient for them, that every one of them may take a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said unto him, There is a lad here, which hath 5 barley loaves and 2 small fishes, but what are they among so many? So, following, Jesus then performs the miracle of feeding 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fishes. But we see here Philip's perspective in this is Philip was no doubt probably what I would call a practical thinker, kind of a realist, meaning there's all these multitudes of people and we have this small, how in the world Like, there's no, we can't go buy enough food for all these people. We can't, like, whether he knew it or not, a miracle would have to happen for all of them to eat that day. And then they eventually had enough to take leftovers, if you will. But we see that Philip was a practical thinker. In ways, he probably kind of handled the group, not the group's finance, but maybe the group's, I don't know, possessions or what. Just he kind of helped the group out, kind of navigate probably in different situations and or whatnot. But we see here that he poses. Jesus asks him, "When shall we buy that these may eat?" And Philip basically tells him, "Hey, we didn't got enough." So I don't know what we're going to do. And we see that Andrew, as we talked earlier a few weeks ago, that Andrew kind of brought forth this lad that had 5 loaves and 2 small fishes, and Jesus did a miracle. So that's Philip's perspective, I guess you will, in the miracle of feeding the 5,000. And then, so the next place that he's at, if you'll flip over to John chapter 12. And here we see that this is where a feast is happening, and some of the Greeks, Gentiles, want to see Jesus while he's there. In chapter 12, starting in verse 20, "And there were certain Greeks among them that came up to worship at the feast. The same came therefore to Philip, which was of Bethsaida of Galilee, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would see Jesus." So these Gentiles, these Greeks, come to the feast. They see Philip, which they probably knew Philip. He was from the same town that these people were from, and desired him, saying, Sir, we would to see Jesus. And here's where kind of Philip and Andrew I think maybe were close. Philip comes to Andrew, and then Andrew and Philip go tell Jesus. And I know we talked a couple weeks ago about how Andrew was more, I think, more bold than what Philip was. Andrew had no problem just going directly to Jesus and asking questions or in different situations. But Philip here gets Andrew, and again, Philip and Andrew are from the same town. And these Gentiles that came to the feast, that, they probably knew who Philip was, and they wanted to see Jesus. So again, Philip gets Andrew, and Andrew and Philip, they both tell Jesus, and then Jesus goes into talking about his death and what is going to happen, what is going to take place to him. Just like he did multiple times, he spoke of what he was going to do, that he was going to die, and he told his apostles multiple times that all these things were going to happen to him, and they didn't believe him. And no different than us, I truly believe that Jesus tells us stuff all the time through his word, and we never heed to that warning, and we just go on and on and on till eventually maybe one day it kind of sinks in, just like it did to the disciples finally. And the book of Acts kind of proves all that. So, John chapter 12, we see Philip mentioned again. And then if you'll flip over to John 14, John 14, Philip gets some really good instruction from Jesus here. And chapter 14 starts off with probably one of the most famous verses in the Gospel of John. In 14, verse 2, Jesus says, in my Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, I would have told you, I go to prepare a place for you. So Jesus is giving some instruction, some teaching. And in verse 3, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I will come again and receive you into myself, that where I am, there ye may be also. And whither I go, ye know, and the way ye know. And Thomas is mentioned here. Thomas says, we know not whither thou goest, and how can we know the way? And Jesus said unto him, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man cometh to the Father but by me. If ye had known me, ye should have known my Father also, and from henceforth ye know him and have seen him. Now, Philip comes into the picture here, and I'll let y'all read verses 8 through 14.
Philip saith unto him, Lord, show us the Father, and it's sufficient us.
Jesus saith unto him, Have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? He that has seen me has seen the Father. And how sayest thou then, Show us the Father?
Believe thou not that I am the Father, and the Father in me? I am in the Father, and the Father in me. The words that I have spoken to you I speak not of myself, but of the Father that dwelleth in me. He doeth the works.
Believe me that I am in the Father, and the Father in me, or else believe me for the very work's sake.
Verily, verily, I say unto you, he that believeth on me, the works that I do shall he do also, and greater works than these shall he do, because I go unto my Father.
And whatsoever ye shall ask in my name, that will I do, that the Father may be glorified with the Son.
If you shall ask anything in my name, I will do it.
So here, Philip is kind of poses the question, and Jesus goes into giving us some of the really great truths that Jesus has kind of ever spoken. All of them are great, but here Philip asked the question. Philip says, Lord, show us the Father. Now, we're halfway almost through the book of, or the Gospel of John, and Philip looks at Jesus and says, show us the Father, after Jesus has already done a bunch of miracles, taught to the Pharisees and the Sadducees, taught to the disciples, and just asked a somewhat of a crazy question with all the different things that Jesus has already done up until this point. But we hate on Thomas for doubting him after the resurrection. Philip here looked him straight in the eye and said, show us the Father. Even though Jesus goes on and puts Philip, if you will, I guess you could say in his place. But at the same time, I think after Jesus kind of goes through this teaching, that Philip probably at that point really understood what was going on. Like, I'm sure Philip knew to some degree, but when Jesus goes on and says, he says in verse 9, have I been so long time with you, and yet hast thou not known me, Philip? Basically, we've been together for a while, and I've done, a bunch of different things, and do you not know me? And he says, "He that has seen me has seen the Father, and how sayest thou, show us the Father?" So again, Jesus, I go back to the fact that obviously I don't know for sure if Jesus had a sense of humor, but I know and Jesus was fully man, fully God. He went through everything that we go through, but at the same time never sinned. But I just wonder, if you've ever been in a situation where people ask somewhat of kind of a ridiculous question, and people say, well, no question or any question is not a bad question. Well, sometimes asking a off-the-wall question can make you look a little like maybe you weren't paying attention or whatever. And if you've ever been in one of those situations and you ever kind of got somebody, I know it's the flesh that does that to us, and we shouldn't do that. And I don't think Jesus was probably doing that at this point. Jesus was wanting to tell him the truth, and not only him. He goes on and tells us, basically, Jesus and God are one. And one of the great truths in verse 14, it says, "If ye shall ask of anything in my name, I will do it." Just some great truths. But if we're ever in that situation, it kind of makes it's our flesh that does it. But when we kind of get somebody like, really, like that, you really just asked that question, like, I feel like my wife does that a lot. No, but no, Phillip again played a big role in the Gospel of John. He asked this question, which led to Jesus giving us some great truths about himself and about how him and God kind of are one. And we kind of go through, and then in the book of Acts, he's mentioned in the first chapter with all the other apostles there after Jesus ascended. Now, there's two Philips that were, quote, I guess you could say, servants of God in the Bible. So you have Philip the apostle, but then there's also another Philip in the book of Acts, which is kind of labeled as Philip the evangelist or Philip the deacon. And that's the story of Philip and the eunuch and the chariot and all of that. So I just don't want you to get confused on when it talks about Philip in the book of Acts. That's not the Philip the apostle. It's Philip the evangelist, if you will. So before I move on, does anybody have anything they want to add to Philip and Nathanael? I bore y'all to death. So as I've kind of gone through, we've kind of hit in a lull, if you will, of the different apostles. And again, like I said before, we're getting to the point where there's not a lot said about one or the other. I was going to go a different direction and go to talk about a parable for the remaining of the class, but I don't think we'll have enough time to get through the entire parable, and I don't want to do anything. It's the one I was going to do was one that probably would take a little bit of time, but I did have a backup plan. So if you want to turn to Psalm 3, we'll go through this, and I'll read for sake of time. Again, this is a psalm by David. This is a psalm that he recorded when he was fleeing his fleeing from his son Absalom. In verse 1 it says, Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Many are they that rise up against me. Many there be which say of my soul, there is no help for him in God. But thou, O Lord, art a shield for me, my glory, and the lifter of my head. I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. I lay me down to sleep. I awaken, for the Lord sustained me. I will not be afraid of 10,000s of people, and have set themselves against me round about. Arise, O Lord, save me, O my God, for thou hast smitten all mine enemies upon the cheekbone. Thou hast broken the teeth of the ungodly. Salvation belongeth unto the Lord. Thy blessing is upon thy people. This song probably gets used a lot, but I'll hit it pretty quickly. Some thoughts came in when I was reading this. Some thoughts came into my mind about different things. And verse 1, David says, Lord, how are they increased that trouble me? Against David. Even though David was, the Bible says he was a man after God's own heart. He had a lot of problems and did obviously some things. He was a man just like us. But as I was reading this, I was thinking that here, kind of in America and in the society that we live in, it's getting worse as far as being a Christian and the persecution and all that. But we're still not at the level as somebody in overseas or in a country that kills Christians. Now we'll more than likely at some point probably get to that point, but we, for the most part, live pretty comfortable lives. We're not too terribly persecuted, but I do want to mention that as I was reading this and thinking about it, when the more that we grow in the Bible and in the Lord, the more wisdom that we get, the more understanding that we get, I think comes with the more boldness that we have to take on certain situations, and with that comes the more the potential to be persecuted. Nobody's going to persecute anybody that is not saying anything for Jesus or for Christ. The more bold we are, the more that I believe that persecution will happen. But persecution is not a bad thing. We see all through the New Testament, in the book of Acts, Peter, Paul, a lot of the other people, as they were persecuted, it seems like they got more and more, they had more and more joy in their heart. They were more fulfilled. They knew that they were doing the will of God. And it leads me to, as I kind of close out here, just something that happened Friday. Now, Friday at work, pretty relaxed day. Theoretically, we could all leave at lunch and nothing's going to burn down. But we have to be there. So, from like 4 to 5, nobody's doing anything at work. And people get in these, like, there's not a ton of us, but a couple people or whatever get in kind of they start talking or whatever about maybe what's going on during the weekend or whatever. And I normally just sit at my desk and I don't really say anything, just trying to make it to 5 so I can go home. Well, the subject of church, Jesus, the Bible came up. And when I left, some of the stuff that I was sitting at my desk hearing, I'm like, it's just, you lose perspective, I think, when we come here, we come to church Sunday, we come Wednesday, we're around the same people, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, we're called to come together as believers. But we also need to understand that not everybody has the privilege or has, if you will, has not been given the full truth, I guess, if you will. Because some of the stuff that was said and about cults and just all kinds of stuff about why people don't go to church and about stuff that's happened in different people's lives and all kinds of stuff. It's sad to listen to that. After I left, I kicked myself for not interjecting. But at the same time, this right here is the hardest thing that I do throughout the week. I don't know what it is, but standing in front of 5 people and trying to teach and to talk about the Bible is difficult. So to do it, and y'all actually come wanting to hear, hopefully not me, but just to hear the Bible. So for me to actually go up to somebody and be like, well, you're completely wrong. Here's
Maybe not lead with it.
Yeah, but there's definitely ways that you could do it, but that's hard because I just in general I cannot have. It's hard for me just to have a conversation with somebody, especially if I don't know them that well. That's just something that's difficult for me. But out of everything that was said, I just want to make sure that y'all know that just because something that I say up here, you still need to do your own research and you still need to do it. Same thing with what Clint when he preaches, or Caleb when he teaches, and all the other ones, Alan, when they stand up and they talk about things in the Bible. Yeah, we put our faith in, I trust that Clint studies and does what he needs to do and is inspired by God to preach to us every week. But at the same time, we still need to do our own research. We can't just take I guess, man's word for what the Bible says. We have to do our own research, and I'm pretty sure that's where a lot of people fall. They get into these different things, and people are giving them saying things that are not true for lack of a better word, just tickle their ear, and they fall into different traps. So, but again, just whatever preaching or teaching you're under, always remember it's your responsibility and it's our responsibility to do our own study in it and to make sure that we're staying right with God. And I'll leave you with this. The craziest thing that I heard was someone said the best preacher that they've ever heard was Copilot. Now, Copilot is Microsoft's version of AI. So, just be aware that because you put something in a search engine or whatever, it's going to give you a bunch of information. That does not mean it's always true. And it can lead you down a path, especially when it comes to biblical things about the Bible and about Jesus. So I wanted to mention that because AI is being, it's a thing, especially in my world. I use it at work for different things. But just be cautious when you use it for things, for biblical things. Let it not replace the actual Bible. So again, I wanted to get that off my chest, so I appreciate y'all listening to that. So thank y'all for coming this morning.